welcome everybody. I think the recording's begun. Welcome to what I count to be our 175th Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar, hosted from the University of Reading, generously sponsored by the Sports Economics Review. And it's a great pleasure this week to have Megan Sullivan from Heriot Watt University presenting home advantage in local league table tennis matches. Megan is happy to take questions as she goes along. So if you do want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand or jump in and ask your question. Meg, you've got up to an hour if you want it, and there's loads of time for Q&A at the end. And I've got nothing else that I need to say, so please do take away your talk, Meg.
Perfect, thank you. So as James has kindly said, I'm looking into home advantage in local league table tennis matches. This is with my co-author Michael, who hopefully at some point is going to join. So if I get stuck, I can lean on him and test whether or not he's paying attention. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm here.
So
sorry, I should have announced that I was here. I'm here.
Okay, nice. Okay, so I play table tennis, have done for years. I'm not amazing or anything like that, but I've always thought about what could we look into in terms of from a sports economics point of view, and the idea of home advantage came to mind. So a quick outline of how this is going to go. I'm going to give you kind of an introduction, and then obviously we need to really get on the same page as what home advantage is. And then I need to explain to you why I've chosen a local league as opposed to, I don't know, say like professional or something a bit higher up. I'm then going to cover some background, and then something that is really important is, well, what is player ability? And I'll explain about like how we're measuring that and why I think it's important. What affects the outcome of a match? But then obviously more importantly, we're talking about this home advantage, and rather than just like jumping straight into any data, we need to look into kind of what's the mechanism there, what's potentially the home advantage channels that could be at play within table tennis. There's a very, very brief section on literature because table tennis isn't the most popular sport there is, and you guys haven't covered it yet, so that's why I'm filling that void there. I'm then going to get onto my data and methodology and some results. So this is, I'm going to preface this by saying this is still kind of like it's in its like early stages. So yeah, I'm really just wanting some feedback really. Okay, so I'm going to be really sad and school teacher like and show you a video. So I'm hoping if I just switch screens, this is going to show. I'm going to make sure I get the right one. Okay, has that shown YouTube?
Yeah, it is.
Perfect. Okay, so don't worry, I'm not going to watch all of this. I'm just showing you a snippet.
So the main things to look at when you are considering a table tennis table are firstly the thickness of the top. Now, we're not talking about this whole thickness here. This is just a skirting, this part here. We're just talking about how thick the actual piece of wood is that the ball's bouncing on. So that's the thickness that you're looking for there. As a guide, if you can get anything around 18, 20 mils or even more, then that's better. The thicker, the better, because the thicker it is, the more even bounce you're going to get all over the table. Think about it in the extreme. If you had a really thin piece of wood, it'd be too flexible, too soft, and then the outside would be a bit different to the inside. So a nice thick piece of wood is what you're really looking for. As far as
okay, so that's kind of really to set the scene there that table tennis can really become a game of small differences. I don't know if you were listening to the measurements there, but he was saying like 18, 20 millimeters. That's such a tiny difference. I'm not even sure that I would kind of like, if I was looking at that, I would be able to see that difference. But in table tennis, it can actually really affect how the ball bounces. So when I said in my abstract, you know, table tennis is a game of small differences, that's kind of one of the things that I was referring to. So what is a home advantage? In the previous literature, we have found that they're defining a home advantage as a win or loss ratio greater than 1 for home matches. Now, this is fine, but when we go and look further into their analysis, it's clear that their definition assumes that everything else is the same. And they can somewhat get away with that. I'll briefly explain it now, but I'll go into it in a lot more depth later. It's because the people that are playing at home, it's the same team that plays away. But we don't have that in a local league setting. We can have different players playing the home matches and the away matches. So in our paper, we need to make sure that we have included explicit controls. Otherwise, we've not kept the things the same, and therefore we're not really sure about what this is measuring. So why local league, firstly, and not professional? Because most kind of look into this obviously goes for the higher levels. And we came up with a few reasons why this is. So whilst the professionals train in their home country, this does not mean their match will be at the venue they've trained at. And this isn't like kind of football where I think you train in the stadium you'll end up playing your match in. So, and it's not as if like climate and altitude and stuff like that are going to affect you, because you're in a sports hall typically that's air conditioned and so on and so forth. So what we're looking into is we're looking at the things particularly in that venue that are going to affect whether or not they're going to have a home advantage. And we find that at the professional level that isn't staying consistent, because where they're training isn't eventually where they'll be playing their match. It'll be some kind of like central venue. I'm thinking potentially that the home advantage may be much more prevalent at the lower level. And our reasoning for that was really that we think that maybe once you get to a certain level, kind of this professional, semi-professional level, you've kind of had practice at a variety of venues by that point. It may be, not only is it small differences, it's much more of a mental game than anything else. Maybe that you are no longer so much more mentally affected by going to a different place, so you've got a better mental headspace. And it's potential the fact that you've got a high skill set that means you can overcome any of these like differences that normally affect you at different venues. So we picked local league, one because we know it very well, we have data, but two because we're thinking actually that may be the case where home advantage may be much more prevalent. Whenever we've looked at kind of videos, or I've gone to watch a professional kind of like match, so I went to watch England versus Serbia, we find that actually the equipment is much more standardized. And if we think back to that quick video that we saw about the table and the thickness, if you tend to get them using the same brand and the same thickness when it's professional level matches, we haven't really got as much of a channel for a home advantage, and therefore it's a lot less interesting to look into. And as far as we are aware, we are the first paper to actually focus on table tennis within England. I know England isn't kind of renowned for table tennis, and that might be why, but the papers that we've seen have really focused on either Hungary or Germany. So it's interesting to see, have a look into England. So I'm not expecting you to know all about table tennis. Yeah, it's a bit of a niche. Most people call it ping pong, and that really upsets me, but never mind. So I thought I would talk you through like quickly some of the rules for table tennis, because it'll help you understand the analysis a bit better. So in table tennis, you have a best of 5 legs. Basically, you can never result in a draw. Each leg is played up to 11 points, and this is you only go beyond 11 if you ever get to 10-all, because you have to win by 2 clear points. And in terms of service, like service alternates every 2 points until you get to deuce, when then you just get 1 serve each. So this is kind of like the standard background, not only at local league, but at professional level, that you need to kind of understand in terms of how you win a match and how things are played out. So in a local league format, you typically have a 3-man team, and everyone plays each other. So we're getting 9 matches. Now, if you go and look into this, you might see at some point there's like 10 matches recorded. That's only because at some divisions you play a doubles tournament. We have decided to ignore any doubles, mainly because it's not at every division, so the observations become a bit weird. But also, when we start talking about player ability, it would become very hard to figure out how to include that properly if we've got a doubles in there, because obviously you're not just yourself anymore, you've got a partner. Each team plays, you play each other twice, basically. You play them at home and then you play them away. But similar to what I said earlier, you do not have to field the same players for the home and the away match at local league levels. Whereas in the existing literature, they've always looked at matches when the same players have played home and away. And we don't have that kind of privilege. We have different players playing, depending on availability, depending on what the captain picks, and so on and so forth. It is therefore possible that you could argue maybe stronger players are fielded for the home matches. And I'm going to go into a lot more later on about why we've said that, because obviously we could have just said maybe it's possible it's the weaker players, but we do have a kind of a basis for that, but I will talk about that more later on. Now, you're not fixed to your division, so you find that players can play up. You get registered into a division, so let's say there's 3 divisions, 3 being bottom, 1 being top. Let's say you're registered to start in Division 3. That enables you to play up in Division 2 and Division 1, but the reverse is not true. If you're registered in a higher division, you can't play down. So you could argue maybe there's some incentive there to register people into a lower division so that they have the kind of they can play up rather than just getting stuck in their one division. Although you tend to find that players like to be in a division that suits their ability. And because of that, because they don't want people completely abusing that, there is a rule that once you've played up more than 3 times, you're going to get stuck in that higher division for that season, because otherwise it's a little bit unfair. You could just be playing every single match and potentially doing very, very well. Now, the rules are not overly strict on which divisions players should be registered into and play. That's kind of down to club discretion. Now, you would find maybe on the whole that players don't want to be in a division that's too weak for them because it'll be boring. So we don't have a big issue, although you do get the odd player that, I don't know, only wants to play a few matches, wants to play with a team that they've always played with, and the rest of the team isn't strong enough to play up, and therefore they stay where they are. But on the whole, we tend to find that that's not a big of a worry as it may sound initially. The only issue is at the end of every season, you get promoted or relegated. So the top 2 teams get promoted and the bottom 2 get relegated. And if your team gets promoted, you could essentially put a team into the higher division next season, but the players within that doesn't have to be the same as the team that got you promoted in the first place. So it is a little bit funny at local league level that you can kind of mess around with things, and we do see that happening. But luckily it's quite low level. And then in terms of when you play a match at local league level, the kind of etiquette or the rules are that when it comes to putting your players down in terms of an order, the home team gets to choose first. Now, there's no, at a higher level, some argue that you have to put them down in terms of seed. So like you have to have a seed 1, seed 2, seed 3. We don't have that at local level, and it's kind of not necessary because you are just playing each other. But some people may argue that it's like a mental game about who has to go first. And if you're the away team, you get to see what the order is, and then you could put your players down accordingly. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you've got me that doesn't want to play their player, whoever they put first. I don't want to play them first. I want them to be tired out a little bit, which we do tend to do if I think they're old. And then I get to play them at a later time in the match. But anyway, that's just the way the format is laid out. Okay, so player ability here. This is a really important one. Now, if we were to pick 2 table tennis players in a local league at random or in general at table tennis, you'd bet maybe that the one with the higher ability is the one that's going to win. Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to argue no. I'm going to say you might not think that if you knew the game. Now, the reason for this is because styles really can make matches when it comes to table tennis. Like we said, it's small differences, while styles are also really, really important. So to kind of like show what this really means by this, because if you haven't ever watched table tennis, you're not going to really know what I mean. I'm going to show you a video of 2 very different styles. And these are the best table tennis players going. So this is an incredible match. So hang on, if that goes too big, I'm going to play it.
This is not local England.
So in case that wasn't obvious, the guy at the top, or the red, was the attacker, and the other guy would be typically what we'd call in table tennis a defender. Now, this defensive style that you just saw can cause huge problems at club level. At professional level, we don't tend to see that. We tend to see that they can handle it quite well, but at club level, someone with a defensive style can really cause issues for certain players. So the reason why is I would say there's definitely two types of styles, and I've kind of umming and ahhing about whether to put a third one in there. So the first one is the defender, like you saw on the clip. This is a really old school way of playing table tennis. You tend to find it doesn't get taught anymore. So if you are suddenly going to go to a club and learn to play table tennis, they'll teach you to be an attacker. They won't teach you to be a defender. And at club league level, all the defenders typically tend to be old men. Attackers, it's the much more modern style. It's the thing that you're going to be taught about. It's the thing that you're encouraged to be nowadays. And again, it's something that we see a lot more, and it's much more common. And then number 3 is a mix. Yeah, I'm not sure whether I'd have this fully as a style of play, because even a defender at some point maybe do an attacking shot, or an attacker will do a defending shot. So yeah, I'm not too sure how I'd actually classify that, but we could potentially argue that maybe you are just this kind of like all-rounder, and therefore you're a mix, although that's quite uncommon and I haven't really properly seen that yet. So it's not always the case that given 2 randomly picked players, we would expect the higher rated player to win. Now, you might be saying, if that defender is causing so many issues, surely that would be reflected in their rating. I disagree, because it's this idea that they're not going to cause problems to everybody, but they do cause problems to some people, especially the younger lot that have just come in and they haven't really ever experienced this defensive style before. They particularly are bad at it, but other people actually have been taught to some extent with it and can handle it. So I would argue that it might not necessarily be the case that it's reflected in their rating. But because of this, then, we must be much more careful about our definition of relative ability and how it can be used for prediction purposes. So we've got two players, A and B. A is higher rated. If you put player A and player B against a randomly chosen third party, then yes, on average, I would expect player A to do better. That's what we're kind of meaning by relative ability. But what we're not saying is, if you're higher rated, you're going to win, because you could be higher rated, but then you come across a defensive player that is quite rare these days and you're not very good at. And therefore you will lose. So that's kind of what we're trying to make sure we have the definition as when it comes to talking about ability or relative ability. Okay, so how is ability measured in table tennis then, or especially at this local league? So you tend to get given some what we call as a base rating. Now, it doesn't have to be the same. I know in some kind of sports, they automatically give you a same rating, and then you win or lose and it changes that. That's not the case. At local league, what we tend to find is, if you're a newbie, if you just joined and we don't know anything about you, and there's nobody kind of in the club or in the league that knows you, that can kind of say, oh, I think their rating should be similar to so-and-so, we'll let you play a few matches. I don't know why I'm acting like I make the ratings. I don't. Whoever does it, they'll let you play a few matches, and they'll see kind of how you've done against those players, because they'll know what those players are like, and then they'll come up with a rating for you based on that. So you're not automatically jumped in with a rating, in which case, if you're new, then there's some observations of you that we can't count because we don't have a rating for you. But this rating is constantly getting adjusted. So it's always adjusted based on the outcome of matches. So as the season goes on, we would hope, if players are playing more matches, we would expect their rating to better reflect their ability. If you were to beat a higher rated player, you would gain points. And if you were to lose to a lower rated player, you'd lose points. The points you gain doesn't have to be the same as the points they've lost. So they can be different. And that's someone central works all of that out. And like I've said, they use the differences in your ratings to figure out what your rating change should be. So how much better was that person, and if you beat them, then you've done really, really well, and you deserve a lot of points for that. And like I've just said, the points that you win aren't necessarily the same as the points that get lost from the other person. Okay, so we then got to think to ourselves, well, what really affects an outcome of a match? And we've kind of narrowed it down to these 3 things. We really think relative player ability is important. If it wasn't, then it's not really much point why we rate people if you can just play and it will just kind of be a flip of a coin. Like we said, we think styles is really important because we tend to find that younger players that haven't done any defensive training can struggle against a defensive player. And then our really important one, which we're going to focus on a lot more as well, is venue effects. So we keep talking about home advantage, and we need to really kind of like clarify the mechanism here, or the channels through which this home advantage could play. And these are the few that we've kind of thought about, and we're gonna talk about a lot more. So the first one is venue familiarity. So, for example, lighting. There's some clubs that I've been to, and their lighting is appalling. It's really dark, and you tend to find that people struggle if they're not used to it in terms of seeing the ball, and maybe they'll lose and they'll blame it on the lighting. Flooring, you might think, really, how different can flooring be? The reason why this one sticks out is my local club that I train at or play matches at. The flooring is really weird that nothing bounces on it. You can't bounce the ball on the floor. Now, I'm used to that, so it's not a problem for me. But we had a player come to our venue to play a match, and her pre-game ritual, or before she serves, is she bounces the ball on the floor. And she really got in quite like a bad mental headspace when she couldn't do this, because this was like her ritual that she thinks she needs to do in order to play well. And it became strikingly obvious there that, actually stuff like this can really affect your how you play. Given that video we showed right at the beginning, tables are so different. You can have different brands, different thickness, depending on how wealthy your local club is, depends on how easily they can just buy a new table and replace it, and therefore you've got wear and tear. And you might be thinking, what do you really mean by wear and tear of a table? So there's a few things. Firstly, not all players are very careful. They might accidentally hit the table, in which case you might get a little chunk out of the table, and when a ball bounces on that, it flies off in all directions, so that can affect things. Bearing in mind, when we're playing a match, at the end of every leg you do switch ends, so to try and make it a little bit more fair. But I suppose if you're used to that and there's like a dip there and you think a ball's going to go there, you're going to be much more aware of things. Similarly, over time, tables tend to just become a bit what we call dead in table tennis. You tend to find the ball doesn't really bounce off of it very well or very high. And if you're used to that, then you know where what we call in table tennis the top of the bounce is, and that's what you really need to know for your timing. But if you come to that club to play a match because you're an away team, that might take some getting used to, and it could potentially cost you a match. And then finally, it's a match ball. So even though it's a local league and it is kind of well organised, clubs themselves kind of buy their own equipment and buy their own match balls, and sometimes even like just use a ball that they shouldn't be using, like a training ball, because someone forgot to bring the match ball, and you don't really know that's going to be the case until you turn up. And different balls, different quality, different bounces can really affect things. If well, I'm not good enough to notice that difference, but some people are good enough to notice that difference. Okay, and then the next channel we were thinking about is travel. So from what we know and from personal experience, we tend to find that people typically tend to play for their local club. So that tends to be the club that's obviously closest to them. And we were thinking that maybe if you have to play an away match, it could be travel fatigue in terms of like you've had to travel a longer distance than you're used to before playing table tennis. But the one that really rings a bell, because my mum is an absolute nightmare for it because she plays as well, it's a family thing, is route familiarity. She's a nervous driver. I'm pretty sure that she's probably not the only one. It's quite common for females to be for nervous drivers from what I see. And if she has to go to a away match and she has to drive and she hasn't done that before, she can get herself into a right state, and then she's turning up and she's just not really ready to play at all. And she's definitely used that as a very good excuse for reasons why she's lost games that she should have won in the past. So route familiarity is pretty important. And then finally, this is kind of like not from the literature on table tennis. This is more from the literature on other sports, so maybe football. Some people argue about crowd effects, and I can see how that could be important. Like, you feel really supported. There's potentially people there that can, well, in table tennis, for example, you could potentially have somebody there that can give you some coaching advice, because you are allowed coaching advice in between legs. The only reason we've put it down to mention it, so you don't think we've left it out, but we are confidently ignoring crowd effects as a channel, because local league, it doesn't seem to happen. You don't get spectators coming. It tends to just be the 6 players that are playing that match that evening. The only time I've ever seen like the odd person turn up is if it's a junior player and the parents have dropped them off and they don't want to have to go all the way home just to come back to pick them up, in which case they'll stay. That's about as much as it gets. We're not really seeing big crowds cheering you on. So we're thinking that we can like neatly rule out crowd effects as a mechanism there. Okay, so literature is quite sparse for table tennis, but I suppose we can also look into any home advantage literature. Balmer et al. Found that there are home advantages in some individual sports where the referee's subjective judgment is involved. So this isn't table tennis, this is just individual sports in general. When we think about local league table tennis, the referee are the players playing. So you tend to alternate between a home player and an away player. So if we're playing a match, I'll referee the first match, and then an away player would referee the second one. So I don't think there could be kind of like bias in that sense, because if I thought that the away referee was refereeing in such a way that would be against us, well, we're going to get our payback in the next game. But similarly, luckily with table tennis, there's very little subjective judgment involved. There's been very few times where as a referee I've had to be like, oh, I'm not sure like what to call that. So it's very minimal and not really much of a problem. A paper that was on table tennis, they argued that table tennis is a rather objectively measured sport, so that would agree with what I've just said. And they use this to say why they don't expect and go on to not find a home advantage. But if you look at their paper, they do very, very basic analysis. Part of the reason is because they have it at a higher level, where your home team also plays, the same players play away. So all they do is a chi-square test, and they also look at, this is actually quite interesting, it'd be cool if I maybe do something similar. They went and asked all the players for their subjective measure on whether or not they think they are more likely to win at home. And they asked them, and then there was kind of like, there was no overwhelming, oh yeah, I play better at home. So even players themselves aren't really thinking that it's important. Now, whilst this may mean that I don't think there's any kind of like scoring discrepancies or like a home advantage via the referee channel, I don't understand, or I don't really see how that overcomes or negates any of the other channels. So I do think that you need to kind of like look into them as well. So in terms of our data then, we've got data which is coming to 2,510 match observations, and it's across all 3 divisions in the North West Kent League. And at the moment, this is just for one season, but I know the guy that does the website and has all the data, so I'm hoping that he's going to also be kind enough to send me the data for lots and lots of other seasons. But for now, it's still kind of in its like preliminary stages, so we've just started with the 2023 to the 2024 season. In terms of dependent variables, we wanted to try out quite a few things. So we firstly thought, well, we can go for what would probably be obvious. We'll just have a dummy. That's 1 if you win and 0 if you lose. But then we thought, is there not like other things we can do with this? Because this data set has kind of has every single leg score. So we thought, well, why don't we try and do like a difference in legs 1? Well, if we do that, the options that are available to us are just these. It's -3, -2, -1, 1, 2, 3. So -3 would mean that someone just beat you three legs straight. -2 would be they beat you because someone has to win, but you managed to get a leg off of them, and so on and so forth. Now, in our data set, I technically have duplicates initially. So I would have had 5,000 and something, because I have it for home and away. So what we've done is we've cut it down and we've said we're only going to look at the home, because it's just a duplicate, so I don't need to be looking at it twice. So the 2,510 is just all the home matches, but technically if you looked into the data set, you'd be able to see that same match for the opposition player, and obviously there'd be away. In terms of independent variables, I've included a difference in ratings. So you both have a rating, but I care about your difference. And I've also included time of year. The reason why we thought about this is we just thought, is it possible that as the season progresses, you're getting much more experience at different venues, or just better experience playing in general, playing match play, which is, it's very much a mental game, and therefore maybe that will make a difference. So we thought we better control for that. And in terms of our methods, we thought we would just, because the existing literature did it, we thought we'd also do a chi-square test because it's not difficult to do. But then we thought we'd expand upon this by looking into a few models. So we've looked into a linear probability model that just uses our win or loss dummy as our dependent variable. We've done OLS with that pseudo-continuous dependent variable, which is that difference in legs 1. Again, we think there are potentially issues by treating using like a pseudo-continuous variable, but that's something we need to like robust and check for. And then we've also used a logit model. So given all of this, and given that earlier on I ranted on for ages about how important styles is, maybe you're sitting there thinking this is like a bit weird that you've not included anything to do with styles. So the reason for that is we don't have data on styles, so the data set doesn't include that. Now, technically, I potentially could get a variable that tells whether or not you're an attacker or a defensive player, purely because I know pretty much every single person in this local league, and if I don't, somebody else does. But I don't want to do that. Firstly, it's a bit time consuming. Secondly, it is kind of subjective to some extent. Like, some people are really obviously attacker and some people are really obviously a defender, but there might be the odd person, someone's like, oh no, when they played me I felt they were a defender and therefore I put them down as a defender, and I don't really want to start going down that subjective route. So we sat down and we thought, well, given that we're interested in the effect of venue and styles can affect match outcome, have we got a problem here? Is styles correlated with venue? And we thought about this and we thought, well, the only way we would be causing ourselves problems is if, let's say, take this defensive player that we said causes a few problems, is if for whatever reason they only ever play home matches. So it could be the case that, they typically tend to play home, and therefore it's kind of like muddying our analysis. And that's quite valid. And we even thought to ourselves, maybe that could be true because the defenders are old people. Maybe the old people want to stay at home. They don't want to travel very far. So that could be true. This is where the benefit of playing in this league comes in. I've met old defenders playing away matches. So I'm not convinced that your style is particularly given at a certain home or away venue. So yeah, I'm not particularly worried about that. And also, what we'd need is not only that, is you'd need a person that is not very good at dealing with a defensive style, like always playing away. And again, I don't think that's going to be the case. The people that aren't very good at playing the defensive style typically tend to be the younger people, which are like the juniors. And if anything, they might actually be much more likely to play at home. Purely because table tennis, these matches, they're played in the evening, they go on to really late at night. You're playing until like 11 p.m. You get home late. So a lot of parents want their kids to play home matches so that they're closer to home and that they can get home, go to bed, go to school in the morning. So yeah, we are kind of confidently, but maybe misguidedly, if someone has another reason why, that we don't think we need to control for styles. So that's why we haven't included it. Okay, so in terms of our results then, so the first thing that we've looked into, that's very blurry, I didn't see that earlier on, is we've done just a chi-square test. So all this is a simple comparison of observed frequencies with the expected frequency. So we've put our expected frequency as just 50%. And all we're looking into is the frequency of home wins significantly different from 50%. And this is similar to the analysis that's done in previous papers. And what we can see is that the home win frequency is 51.6. Now, if this was in a previous paper, they'd say that's greater than 50%, and therefore there's a home advantage. But the null hypothesis is that the frequencies are the same, so both 50%, and we do fail to reject that. So we're confidently rejecting the null hypothesis of no home advantage. But also we need to take these results with a pinch of salt, because remember, in our analysis, the people that play away aren't necessarily the same people that's played at home, and therefore we would expect ability to come into this, and we haven't controlled for that here. This is like really kind of like naive basic analysis. So even though this comes out saying there's no home advantage, yeah, we need to do a bit more than just this. So we took it a bit further and we decided to look into a linear probability model where we've got our win or lose as a dummy variable. And this time we've controlled for rating difference and days from start of the season. So like I've said, every match is a home match for just one team and an away match for the other, and we've just kept the home matches. We find, so just a bit of context before I delve into this, we find that home players are slightly stronger on average by 5 rating points. So when we just took an average of ratings, home and away, we found that they are slightly stronger, which is interesting. Which means that if we were to ignore rating difference, it's a limited variable and it's correlated with playing at home and potentially with winning. Our intercept in this comes out as 0.509. And we think that we can take this to mean, because it's only home that we're looking at here, this means an expected home win frequency once player ability and match data taken into account of 50.9%. Now, this is slightly lower than the naive model, that chi-squared analysis that we've just done. And if we do a t-test on that intercept being different from 50% or 0.5, we fail to reject that null. So this is coming out as there's like no apparent home advantage. We see that date has no apparent effect. I'm not sure that's too surprising really. And if we look into rating difference, because you're probably looking at the number going, I have no clue how to interpret that, and I don't blame you. Well, firstly, it is significant, but let's kind of steer away from that. It's positive, so that's good. We're kind of saying that, you know, if you're higher rated, you're kind of more likely to win, which is kind of what we would think on expectation. But yeah, what does that number mean? So that means if we were to have a rating difference of 100 points, you would increase your win probability by about 5 percentage points. Now, in terms of table tennis, if I had to go and play a player and I saw they were 100 points ahead of me in the ratings, I wouldn't be sitting there going, oh, I'm so worried. 100 points isn't that much in the way our ratings have done. And I would put us kind of like on fairly similar terms. They've obviously done a bit better than me, but yeah, 100 points isn't anything to kind of like get in a fret about. I don't think I'm playing some extraordinary brilliant player. But if you then put that up to 1,000 points. Now, if I had to play someone that's 1,000 points better than me, I would probably not want to turn up, because they probably shouldn't be in my division. They're a lot better than me, and that would mean that we've got an increased win probability of 50 percentage points. So pretty much there's no chance for the lower rated player, and that agrees with what we think and what we know about table tennis and how the ratings work. So what have we found here? We found that once we've added in rating difference, it reduces that modelled win-loss ratio from 0.516 to 0.509, which is interesting. Now, we use this linear probability further just to see, like, is it any good? Like, is it actually any good at predicting whether or not someone's going to win or lose a match? Because I know we're trying to steer away from, like, significance and t-tests and p-values because of all like the drama that's going on. So is it actually a good predictive model? And what we are able to find is we find that it's able to predict 79.24% of outcomes correctly. And we do that by saying, okay, you're going to predict a probability for each observation, and we say if that probability is greater than 0.5, if it's what it's saying, and you won it, that's correct. It's gonna put you down as correct. Or if it says that your probability is less than 0.5 and you actually lost it, again, we're going to say the model's got it correct. So we get a prediction of 79.24% there. Okay, so we then move on and try and use a different dependent variable just to see, like, kind of, do our results consistent at all? And in this case, this is a little bit more difficult, I suppose, to get your head around. We use leg difference. So it was those numbers like -3, -2. You just can't have 0 because somebody has to win at the end of it. The intercept on this is 0.061 roughly, and again we find that it's not significantly different from 0. So because what does that mean? Well, in leg, if you've got legs that, like, the difference is not significantly different from 0, we would argue that's kind of arguing a draw in expectation. Now, I know that I said you can't have a draw in table tennis, but it's okay because this is in expectation. So if you were to think of a 6-sided die, you don't argue it when you say you get an expected roll of 3.5, right? Even though there's not a 3.5 on the dice. So I think we are okay in saying that. Again, we find that the date is not significant at all, and like, for example, 100 days further into the season predicts a leg difference that's like 0.03 legs better. So yeah, I'm not surprised it's coming out like that. And then in terms of our rating difference, it is significant. It's positive again, which again the theory would kind of suggest. And what we're finding is if you had a difference of 1,000 points, bearing in mind, again, I said that's extreme. That's somebody that's a lot better than me and probably shouldn't be in my division. It predicts a leg difference that's 3 legs better, i.e. from an expected draw to a 3-0 victory. So a complete whitewash. So it's showing how important that rating difference variable is, and it's kind of like picking up all that effect. Okay, and then finally, we do the same thing, but we decide to use a logit model. And okay, this is where it's a little bit odd, and we need to really sit down and think about what this is showing us, and so on and so forth. But we get a negative constant in our logit, and we find it's not significant, but it would actually kind of suggest that you're more likely to lose at home slightly, because 40. I've put an extra 0 in there. That should be 48, but anyway, 44. But anyway, 48%. So yeah, so that's a little bit weird that it's negative, but it's still not showing us that there's any kind of like home advantage. And if we did the same as we did for the linear probability model in terms of what its prediction accuracy is, we get a prediction accuracy of around 79%. So we're still into those high 70s. So what have we done here? We've kind of hopefully motivated why there might be a home advantage in table tennis. We've stressed the importance of ability and how it's important to how you kind of like define that. We've tried to control for it, and we think that the results for rating difference, including it, does make sense. But we do just tend to find that there really isn't any strong, significant home advantage in local league table tennis matches. And that was all we have done.
And you're finished, Meg?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much for a really very interesting talk, a introduction to table tennis, local league table tennis in North Kent, was it? Not South Kent.
Northwest Kent, yeah.
Northwest Kent. Even, yeah, that's fantastic. Really, really interesting, and we've got plenty of time for Q&A, and so I will invite folk who've got questions to raise their hands. Julio. You're on mute. I muted you, Julio, a while ago, just in case you haven't
There was someone rustling at one point, yeah.
Julio, you're on mute. I can't unmute you though.
I don't think he wants to give me his question.
Ah, you obviously can't hear us, I guess. Julio, you're on mute. Can't hear you.
Sorry.
There you go.
I start. I'm Julio from Spain. I used to play table tennis at national level, so I really enjoyed this paper. It was for the mute was to try my English. Okay, so I love this presentation, and I would like to, if you have some working paper or whatever, I would like to read it. I have some points. Someone because I'm table tennis player, and some other because I'm more kind of econometrician. The table tennis one, I guess you are only using the individual data matches. I think that you should also try or use the team level. So when you play the teams, you don't have the individual matches, but you have the team matches, and it's even more important maybe the team matches, because sometimes I don't know in England, but here if you have won 4-0, you are still playing, and these matches are worthless in some sense. So maybe using the team data and not only the individual match data is I don't know, but it could be useful just to test.
I suppose I get that. My thing would be how would we do the right kind of the ability of the team, like getting a measure for the whole ability of the team.
Aggregating the individual level. Actually, could be you could use maybe the lowest player, an average, the highest player, or something similar. Something similar. So I think if you have the individual force, the individual quality of the individual ability, making team ability is quite easy. And other one with table tennis, and this is more table tennis thing. You said in your presentation that you don't like to say this one is attacking player, this one is defender, this one is mixed. Okay, I agree, but you can use an objective measure, that is if this player is using some strange rubber, because you play. You have long pimps, short pips, pips in, I think in English. So I guess at local level you will have everything, and it could be an objective measure, because having a strange rubber, it could be drive to strange results. Right now displaying the China Great Tournament, and a Rising Star Japanese have lost with a Chinese, mainly because the Chinese play with long pips in an attacking style quite strange. I actually only see to a Spanish player before. And you can figure out. I'm sure I will send you. I will send you some more thoughts in the future, and if you send me your paper I will read it carefully. And my econometrician, unless me, I was. You have to explain. Maybe you have to explain a bit more your empirical strategy, because in these 3 slides, I was expecting to have a home advantage, a dummy variable for the local teams, or something like that. If it's not significant, it's not significant. But at least for me, it was some surprising. I don't know how do you test the home advantage test, or this home advantage issue.
Well,
with this,
it's only home matches included. That's why. Because there's no point doing both, because I'm duplicating. If I'm down as away, the scores that I've got, my opposition is in my data set as a home with the same scores. It's just double. It's just the flip. So,
but maybe in this, I'm not used to be very happy with doubling the data, but at this time maybe it could be useful. I have to thought, but in some way it's a way to you are able to include the local dummy. So you
Yeah,
have
okay.
obviously the same, but or maybe making a random trial. Some matches are played at home, some matches are played away, or something like that. Because otherwise it's quite difficult to understand the how do you measure the home advantage issue.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid. I think I could have explained that better. So yeah, thank you for that.
It
Thank you
is
very much.
unusual. Sorry to come in. It is unusual, but what we're doing is that the home win percentage is represented by the model intercept in all these cases. So I know that is an unusual strategy, but it's just because every single match is both a home match and an away match, depending on which team you are. So we just thought, right, well, we'll treat every match as a home match. And then if the model intercept is showing a win percentage that's greater than 50%, this home advantage. But it is a bit unusual. Maybe we could do it a different way.
But maybe the constant is not engaging only the home advantage, but also whether the rating difference is significant or not. It's going to be significant, it is significant, but the way in which it's the relation between the rating difference and the result. I think I have to thought a bit more, but
Okay.
I think that the constant is not engaging only I can buy that it's engaged in some way the home advantage, but not only the home advantage, because if you have a rating difference that is huge, the constant maybe is going to even to disappear.
Yeah. Okay.
It could be.
Well,
I don't know. It's a quick thought.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's worth saying that that's a pretty common problem with any kind of sporting data like this, whether you double the data set or not. So I think it's a fairly common thing, and I think that, just taking each match as one observation, I think is pretty well. Different people have different opinions on it, of course, but I tend to stick with the single observation for a match. But it does it can make things a bit trickier because obviously, as you say, the player listed first is always the home player. So. Any more questions and comments?
So if there is not more, I have a rapid thought about this issue. If you use the team level, you have two observations that you can match in some way. So you can identify the home advantage, whether local teams are more prone to win than away teams. Maybe it's another way to look at your data, that you can use your data in so many ways, but maybe matching the local, I don't know, A-B match with the BA match is a way, and later aggregating. In this day, I'm working on this issue with the football, handball, and basketball, and it's the way we measure home advantage. Whether we match the observations with the A, B, I don't know, Real Madrid with Barcelona, and Barcelona with Real Madrid, and we look at the aggregate level or even at the individual level, whether there is home advantage or not. Obviously, the two teams, it will be home advantage with whether more home teams are prone to win their matches.
Okay, yeah, we'll think about that.
So I guess because the match itself is between two clubs, I presume, and each club could choose 3 of their players to play in that given match.
Yes.
So I guess you could then match up, but you probably can't, given you've only got one season. But with more seasons, you could probably match up individuals playing each other at home, in a way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Joe Blogg's playing Peter something or other at both venues.
Yeah, definitely. Because we do tend to find it's the same players playing every season. So, so yeah, that would be doable.
Although player ability is not necessarily constant over time.
Yeah.
So that creates a further problem, doesn't it? Like in my case, for example, a year ago, I was extremely bad, and now I'm only very bad. So
We've all got the age curve effect as well, right? We're all getting that
Yeah.
little bit older every year as well. So
But
Jean-Louis has his hand up. Jean-Louis, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, thanks, James. Congratulations for your presentation. I have just a little question about the other control variables you may adjust for. Maybe is there any effect of the type of rackets or shoes or something like that that may be associated just by chance to the home effect? No?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good question, because you do find people have some like dodgy bats and dodgy rackets.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would have to be that you only really have them at home, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm not convinced on that, but yeah, that's something I should probably think about a bit more carefully, to be honest.
But you know, in that kind of comparison, it's always useful to adjust for variable that doesn't affect directly, but that may by chance be associated to the effect you are studying.
Yeah, okay.
Point. It's
Can you
additional
imagine?
Yeah.
variables. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
I can imagine that you travel to your away game and you get there and you realize you've forgotten some important piece of equipment. Presumably at home, you might be able to nip home and get it, or one of your
Yeah,
club mates
that's
might have
valid.
something they could lend to you, but they wouldn't lend to an opposition player, perhaps.
Yeah, very valid. I don't know, but by the time our sample size gets big enough, hopefully that'll be so small. Those things. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've got a few comments as well, noted down at various points, because I think it's a really interesting piece of work, and I've looked a little bit at home advantage myself. I guess the first question I wondered about, because obviously you said you couldn't, this style question is someone that doesn't have a clue about table tennis. I guess it's as you found, it's quite hard to identify it. But do you have any other player? You got the player rating. Do you have anything else about players, like their age or anything like that you could use to try and identify a playing style?
I don't technically have it, but I could definitely get it, because yeah. So I don't technically have it, but I think I could get hold of that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, how many players are there in the data set?
Oh, hundreds.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah. So I know the person that like centrally organises all of this, and everyone has to be registered with their details to play. So providing everyone would be willing to give over their details, I could get hold of that.
Yeah. I mean, it might be worth trying to get that little bit more
That's
individual
a
level
good idea, though.
data.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, obviously, you're not identifying anybody in doing the work. It's anonymized at the end of the day.
James,
but a
you
little
should
bit.
try table tennis instead of running. It's much better.
You think I should take up table tennis? I'm
Much
bad
better
enough
than
at
running
running.
it is.
I'm bad enough at running. Never mind playing table tennis. Stefan, you got your hand up.
I have, yes. Yeah, but it's always a really interesting subject. So it's always great to see different sorts of data. I mean, the thing that immediately struck me is just, I mean, we're talking Northwest Kent, right? I mean, we're not talking massive distances. So the home away thing seems to be particularly interesting, because normally we think about it as being travel distances. I don't know. I'm unfamiliar. I don't remember. This must come up in the literature, but it might be worth you commenting on and looking at what other people have said about the role of distance, where it's clearly by and large negligible here. The other thing the thing I wondered is, and maybe you said this before, maybe I missed it, but it strikes me you must know the venues if you've got all this detailed information about the games. So can you put in venue dummies to see if they are having an effect?
Yeah, definitely. I know every venue that the match is played at.
That might, I don't know what I would do. That might identify some of where the home advantage is. But I think it's really interesting, and it's worth seeing where you go with this.
Yeah.
And you might also want to throw in individual player fixed effects as well, see if that affects things. You may have things, the variation that isn't picked up by the ratings. The ratings change, don't they? So you wouldn't knock out the ratings by including player fixed effects.
No, the only I suppose my worry is that could be a lot, because it's like quite a lot of different players, because you don't have to field the same team. So that's a lot. Would that end up having a problem of estimation?
Possibly.
Could use random effects. Could use an individual level random effect type model.
One thing about the floor, I don't know in England, but here in Spain it's more common that the floor are much better than some years ago. But some teams have a quite strange floor, while other teams play, I don't know, in green floor or something quite of good quality and very equally. I don't know whether, I guess if you are used to these teams, is some measure that is very easy for you.
Yeah, well, we have something similar. Like we have, like if you go to a venue, they've got white walls, they suddenly play with an orange ball, and that's a problem if you're not used to it. But that's what you're trying to get at. Or did I?
Would much of the characteristics of a venue be related to how old it is? A really old venue more likely to be dingy and rubbish. Newer venue, lighter. All that.
James, it's quite easy to get a new floor.
The reason we're asking is because there's a sport
you only
have
to add green floor that is quite cheap.
Yeah.
Here in Ciudad Real, in our room, we have a horrible floor, but we remove it when we didn't remove it, but we put over there a green set or something similar, and right now it's a great floor. So that's the question. I don't know in England, but here in Spain you have more teams playing with wood floor. Maybe in local you have 50-50, or I don't know the percentage. But
the flooring definitely differs. Yeah.
Here in Spain, even in national level, not at the top ones, but at the Division 3 or 4, the kind of floor is amazing, the difference. And you know that is something very important. People that don't play to table tennis do not understand, but the floor is so important.
Yeah.
Because there's a Sport England data set, Meg, that you may be familiar with. They've produced a data set which is literally every sporting facility in England, which has information about when it was built, and I think information on recent renovations and things. So it might be worth looking at that. Matthew Yeo,
who was
the PhD student that I had until recently, who you may have known, he made use of the Sport England data set, which might have variables you could make use of for thinking about the home advantage.
Perfect. Okay.
And a couple of other comments. One was, you don't include as yet, because obviously these matches are taking place at some point in a broader contest, right? They could be the first one out of the 9 that take place, and they could be the 9th one. So I know there was some work on Davis Cup tennis, which found something like a reverse home advantage for the later, games when it's the really crucial one determining who wins the overall match. And so it might matter which point you are in the overall, fixture. So it could be worth looking at, see if there's any effect of that. I mean, obviously Davis Cup, there's crowds, so it makes a difference. I think the argument there is that there's more pressure for the deciding rubber. But maybe there's still something there in terms of the pressure, at least, even if there isn't a crowd at the local level. And I wondered also whether you might, and again, this is something that, it's in the literature, of course, but you might include whether each player has won their most previous game.
Kind of a mental thing.
Well, exactly. Momentum is something else that's disputed in the literature, but you might try and include a momentum or a dummy for if they've won their last match, let's say, rather than trying to attribute it a momentum effect.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Any more questions and comments? Jorge.
Hello, Jim. How are you doing? Thank you for the presentation. I don't know. I don't know if it's a question or a comment or asking for me to understand, a bit about the motivation, because I played ping pong tennis, but completely amateur. I just like it. But I did play a lot of amateur other sports, especially football, where it's in Spain, where you would travel from one place to another. And, I want to understand what do we mean by home advantage in this type of lower leagues sports? Because for me, when you would go to another city or town, and they had a great grass field, beautiful and stuff, it would actually motivate you to play better because you didn't have that at home. That's one thing. Then, there is a lot of circumstances for amateur players. You always have these teammates that would arrive drunk, and if they actually didn't arrive drunk, they won't play well. I
was one of them.
Yeah, in professionals, yeah. Imagine I lived in Seville, so imagine in the Feria of Sevilla when we had to play in Huelva. Yeah, we would come down from the fair at 7 a.m. and just arrive to go and take the bus, sleep in the bus, and go and play. So my point is, what do we mean by home advantage in amateur leagues? I mean, what are we learning? Because in professional sports we discuss a lot about pressure in various senses: referees, crowds, travel, real travel distances. But in amateur leagues, I want to understand what I'm learning, or what do we want to learn, if there is or if there isn't home advantage in these type of leagues. I mean, it's very confusing for me. That's why I say I don't know if I'm asking or commenting or just,
Yeah, no, okay. Yeah, I suppose at least with the amateur level, we haven't got that. Well, I don't know. I would argue there's not really that pressure because it's not like you're competing for your country. It really did come down to, every year I'm on like the committee for my club. We have a discussion about what table we should get, what ball we should get. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, how much of a difference does this really all make? And that was kind of the motivation. Whether or not I'm actually fully answering that question is another matter. But yeah, that was kind of where that came from.
I'm going to answer to Jorge also. I think that in this setting we don't have pressure, we don't have attendance. So if there is home advantage, there is no because pressure people. So maybe there are other things that could lead to home advantage. And in this setting, it could be more easy to get because everything, the ball is different, the floor, whether they have a good venue with the light, and so many things that you can measure. And in football professional teams, you are not able to measure. So I think with this kind of setting, you are allowed to measure home advantage. Knowing that there is no home advantage because the pressure of the public or because there is no referee, and if the referee doesn't make any choice or almost any choice, maybe 1 point between, I don't know, 1,000 or something like that, there could be problematic. The other ways is only just to pass numbers. So we don't have referee bias, we don't have public attendance. So if there is a home advantage, there is because some other reason. And with this setting, we will be, will be able to answer this question. I don't know, maybe I have helped. This is an issue that actually it was when I saw this paper. It's quite funny, or it was quite funny for me because sometime I have thought about doing for Spain leagues. I don't have time, and I don't. But this is something that I have already thought about.
And everyone drinks after the match, just in case you were worried about turning up drunk.
Of course, that's true for every amateur sports at least.
What about the ones that finish at 11 p.m. though? Because surely that's after last orders, isn't it?
Well, so what we do is we run up, order the drinks, have them on a table. Then when you've played, so quite a few of the venues are in working men's clubs. So it's great. You just run up the stairs, you quickly order your drinks, and then you say, "Oh, it's ready for when we're And that's why I play.
I was just having a look at the website, Meg, and there's like Sutton C versus someone D and so A. Are they A, B, C, D teams, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so your club can enter more than one team. You're meant to label them on terms of which team you think's better. So Sutton A should be better than Sutton B. But you can also just be in the same division. So you'll end up playing your own club mates.
And so therefore you've got, would
Home
there be
basically.
Sutton A versus Sutton B? So both teams are at home?
Yeah, it's actually a good thing now you've mentioned this, actually, because technically it'll come up as a home versus away, but it's a home for that.
Yeah.
So that's really good. Thanks.
Last week Gijón play with Gijón B. Gijón A won. 6-0.
Oh, that's people. The A team was at home, was it? Alphabetical order advantage.
But no, that's actually valid. We missed that, so that's important to look into. Thank you.
Because there are studies that look at football teams that share the stadium and play and the home advantage in those situations. So it's not the same as playing at the San Siro and Milan versus Inter, but I'm sure Sutton A versus Sutton B is an interesting case study. Any final questions and comments? Well, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Michael, for a really interesting discussion of local league home advantage, local league sport. Really fascinating. It's always good to have a new sport in the series. So having table tennis increases the number of sports that have been covered over the years. Next week, we will have Jonas Froch from the University of Cologne presenting the relocation effect of a major league franchise on residential property values, quantifying the intangible benefits generated by the departure of the NFL's Rams franchise from St. Louis. So, wish you all a fantastic weekend. Thanks once again, everyone. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for contributing, and see you all very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Meg.
Bye-bye. Good luck with the paper.